What's up, everybody? My name is Steve Hoffa, and this is the Standing Still podcast. Super stoked that you're here. On today's episode, I've got a great guest. This gentleman is a stand-up comedian who's been in show business for over 50 years. This gentleman has been on national television for over 500 times. He's been on The Tonight Show more than 60 times. He has worked with and toured the world with the late, great Frank Sinatra for over a decade. This guy has done it all. He's worked with talents such as Sammy Davis Jr. He's worked with talents such as Smokey Robinson and many, many others. We go through his entire life from his hard childhood in Chicago to his great life that he lives today. Check out his book, Still Standing. I couldn't put it down. Obviously, it's super similar. It's titled to my podcast, Standing Still. But check out his book, Still Standing, all about his life leading up and working with Frank Sinatra. It's a fantastic story, as you guys could read in that book and as you guys will see on this episode. Tom Dreesen on the Standing Still podcast. All right, Standing Still podcast. My name is Steve Hoffa. Big show for my guest today and myself as well. I got Tom Dreesen. He's got a list of accomplishments for his life that I'm really excited to get into. You've got quite the story to tell, from opening for Frank Sinatra for 14 years to being in the Navy and everything in between. Tom Dreesen, how you doing, man?
I'm doing real good, Steve.
Good deal.
The introduction was correct. It was the shortest introduction I've ever had, but it was correct. I did serve in the Navy. And I also served in a Marine Corps unit called NEGDF, Naval Emergency Ground Defense Force. I trained with him for 9 months, and I also toured with Frank Sinatra for 14 years.
Yeah,
and 45.
You definitely. So here's kind of my goal set for this interview, right? We definitely want to get through your life, and then I definitely want to get your take as far as, because you're a veteran of the game. You're a comedian, a veteran of the game. I'm super excited. I would love to do stand-up comedy. I haven't done it too much. I've definitely done more podcasting than stand-up. So, I mean, I read your book, by the way, which insanely is called Still Standing, when my podcast is called Standing Still. That blew me away when I found that out. Couldn't believe it. But yeah, let's get right into it. So first of all, how's life? How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. Fortunately, after all the COVID is lifted, or somewhat lifted, I've been working again a lot. I just was on the road for 21 days. And then I came home, and I was home for 3 days and went back out again for a corporate date. And I came home, and now next weekend I go to Las Vegas. I'm doing a corporate date for American Dental Association and at the Mandalay Bay. And then I'm also doing my one-man show at the Italian American Club in Las Vegas on Sahara. It's a fun place. And I'm doing my one-man show, which is now called The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. But it's a 90-minute show of I'll try to make it brief, but it opens with a screen with an introduction on film. I've been doing this, by the way, around the country in theaters around the country, but there's a 3.5-minute film of Dennis Farina, God rest his soul, narrates introducing me to the audience. I come out and I do a comedy monologue. I do about 30 minutes, and I segue to a bar on the stage. And on the bar is a bottle of Jack Daniels, which was Frank's drink of choice. And I tell a funny story at the bar, and all the audience starts laughing. As they're laughing, all the lights go out in the theater, and on the screen, Frank Sinatra starts singing, "It's 2:45. There's no one in the place except you and me." You know, the saloon song. And it's like he's singing to me. I'm at the bar. And set him up, Joe. I got a little story you ought to know. Anyhow, when he gets to the chorus, make it one for my baby and one more for the road, he goes off screen, and a spotlight hits me, and now I'm in a bar, and I've come home, and the audience is in a bar with me. And I tell them, the first time I heard that voice, I was 8 years old, shining shoes in a bar on the south side of Chicago in Harvey, Illinois. You know, trying to make money to help feed my brothers and sisters. I was shining shoes in the bar, and he was on the jukebox. And then I take the audience from that little boy hearing Frank Sinatra on the jukebox in Harvey, Illinois, to one day carrying his coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. And so there's a lot of funny stories, all funny stories throughout the whole. And as I'm telling the stories, pictures are coming on the screen authenticating the stories, as well as video of Frank and I. And finally, and it's, you know, my touring with Sammy Davis for years, my touring with doing shows with Dean
Mm-hmm.
Martin, Smokey Robinson, and so many other people I toured with. But a lot of funny stories. And finally, I take them to the funeral, and I have them in tears. And then I turn right around and I close with a very funny monologue. And I toast them at the end. When I say goodnight, I say, I wish for all of you what Frank Sinatra wished for you. The very last song that he ever sang is that the best is yet to come. And I say, goodnight, everybody. And you hear Frank singing, the best is yet to come, as they're leaving the theater,
Right. Here's what I love. First of all, you're still doing 90-minute shows after and killing it, right? Still doing 90-minute shows, still killing it. And you've said it in the book, right? About how, you've been in movies before, you've done all these crazy experiences, you've done golf and celebrity tournaments and things like that. And yet you still love stand-up. That's your jam. That's that live feed, that live crowd. That's what you love the most, right?
Well, I am a stand-up comedian first, last, and always. That's what I am. That's what I prayed to be. That's what I wanted to be at a certain point in my life. And it's what I wanted more. And that's what I am. I'm an actor. I've done some acting and I've done television and some film. I'm a motivation speaker. I speak for corporations and for universities and even for comedians. But I speak on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And I elaborate on those 4 points. And I'm also a master of ceremonies for major corporate events all around the country. And as you pointed, for golf, for the Bob Hope Classic for years, I was the MC. And after Bob couldn't do it anymore, and I was the MC at the Frank Sinatra Celebrity Invitational for 30 years, I also was on a golf tour called the Celebrity Players Tour. It was basketball, baseball, football, hockey, tennis, and show business people that were 10 handicap or below. So it was Johnny Bench, Mike Schmidt, Mario Lemieux, John Elway, Dan Marino, Michael Jordan. We had 42 Hall of Famers. In show business, me, Matt Lauer, Brian Gumbo, Smokey Robinson, Eddie Marinero. Anyhow, so I've done all those things, but my foundation and who I believe I am is a stand-up comedian first, last, and always.
Sure.
I've been able to branch out into other areas, but because I am a stand-up comedian.
What I really, and we'll get into your childhood soon, but so what I really love also as well is that, and similar to my life, is that you weren't the 5-year-old that knew you wanted to be a comedian right away. At least that's what I got from reading your book, right? It was, you did a lot of different vocations. You had quite the life before you even thought about doing stand-up and before you got bit by that bug. You wrote a lot of chapters in your book about really a nitty-gritty childhood, right? I mean, you got in fights, you had to pitch in financially for your family, and this is all in Harvey, which is right outside of Chicago, for those that don't know. I mean, can you talk about your childhood? I don't think that exists too often anymore. You were definitely, from a different period, but just, I mean, yeah, you didn't have an easy childhood, I would say.
Well, I had 8 brothers and sisters, and we lived in a shack. My father was alcoholic. Later on, my mom began to drink, and she later quit later on in life. But it was tough. We lived in a shack. 5 of us at one time slept in one big bed. We had no bathtub and no shower, no hot water. It was a rat-infested, roach-infested shack, and I had holes in my shoes the size of a coffee cup my whole childhood. Whenever you got holes in your shoes, you put cardboard in there. If a window broke, you stuck a rag in it. I say this, Steve. None of this do I regret. I regret none of this.
Sure.
It's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. By the way, that's part of my motivation talks. Perception. All of life is about perception. I perceive it to be a blessing, and it helped build character in me, and also the knowledge that if it is to be, it's up to me. When you're that young and you go out to work to help feed your brothers and sisters, you realize that anything you're going to get in life, you have to go out and get it. So, in fact, that's a slogan I read many years ago, and I have it on my desk even to this day. If it is to be, it's up to me. So
Sure.
It was a tough childhood. However, I had 8 brothers and sisters that I loved, and I had their love, and so there's so many good points to it. Although it was in the brutal winter, even to this day, no matter where I've been at, no matter what I've done. I performed for presidents, 6 presidents in my lifetime. I've toured the nation with Frank Sinatra in 20,000-seat arenas, 40,000-seat in Hawaii. The places I've been, the things I've done. If I close my eyes, I see a little boy with a shoe shine box trudging through the bitter cold in the snow in Chicago, going from tavern to tavern, shining shoes, trying to make money to help feed his brothers and sisters. I'm only a heartbeat away from that boy. I never thought I'd ever be a comedian. It was the furthest thing from my mind.
Right. What were you, well, okay, so you talk a lot about sports as well, but my question is ultimately, what were you really into when you were a kid? Did you have that job that maybe, I wanted to be a pilot or something like that? Or what were you into as a kid? Or were you just super consumed with, getting by kind of stuff?
I was super consumed with wanting to eat.
Fair enough.
I read a book years ago by Anthony Quinn. Anthony Quinn said something so profound, this actor. He grew up raggedy poor, like me. He said, if you've ever been hungry as a child, really hungry, I'm not talking about hungry and you're going to get fed that night. Hungry and you don't know if you're ever going to eat again. You don't know if there's ever going to be another meal. We rarely had meal and food in our house. So if you've ever been that hungry, that hunger never leaves your subconscious mind. So, and I think that part is what driven me, to when I should have quit so many times and I wouldn't quit. It's that childhood hunger, But when I was a boy growing up, I loved sports and I tried to play as much as I could, but I was a little guy. So I always had to play harder than everybody else. I played basketball on an all-black basketball team. I played football on an all-black football team. I was a running back, I was a little guy, and so I had to play harder than everybody else. When I was in the service, I boxed, and when I was in the service, and I was always the kind of guy that I didn't look for trouble, but once the fight started, I wanted to win.
Sure.
I don't mean literally the fight like boxing. I mean in a football game, a basketball game, in a debate. When I came out of the service, and I'd be in, I studied political science and went to junior college. If I got in a debate, I wanted to win that debate.
Sure.
So as a boy growing up, I think growing up poor and growing up hungry and growing up small, I'm 5'9". But when I was a kid, I was a little guy, a little skinny kid, and so that I grew up always, fighting to get everywhere I went.
Right.
And I grew up in a neighborhood where guys fought all the time.
Sure.
If you're in a bar in my neighborhood, there were 38 taverns in Harvey. There were 8 in my neighborhood. If you were in a bar and some guy and you had an argument about the Cubs and the White Sox, the next thing you know, he'd say, outside. That was always the expression. No fighting in here, outside. Everybody go in the parking lot, watch 2 guys beat up each other because they were arguing about the Cubs and the White Sox. Right. Some shit like that. But I grew up in a neighborhood where I never saw intellectual combat. I never saw that. I always saw physical fights, and I became a part of that. And most of it I regret. I really do. But when I went in the Navy, all of a sudden I'm watching. We'd have I'd say a hillbilly from North Carolina, a black guy from Detroit, a Jewish kid from New York, a guy from the South Side of Chicago, an Italian kid, and they'd get into heated arguments. And in the service, you cannot fight aboard ship or anywhere. They call it skylarking. If I shoved you, Steve, I'm going to court. They're court-martialing you.
Sure.
They call it skylarking. You can't. So I'd see these debates. I go, oh, they're going to fight. But they didn't. They would debate. And at the end of the night, one of them might say, you know what? You got a point I never thought about. I got to think about what you said tonight. I had never seen intellectual combat.
Interesting.
And so, the military toned me down a great deal. I began to read books, a lot of books. The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, A Guide to Confident Living, Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics, Think and Grow Rich, The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. That book really changed my life. Whatever the mind can see and believe, it will achieve.
You totally got me right into my next point. I believe it was in your book. You said 17 years old is when you got into the Navy, right?
Yeah, the day I turned 17, I joined the Navy.
So it's super interesting to me that here you are with this kind of, and you definitely touched on the point already of kind of, brash physicality versus intellectual battle, but you had this life that seemed to be very chaotic to me from what I read. And then you go into the military, which is all about structure and discipline. What do you think, maybe other than just the total lack of physical brutality, what do you think was the biggest change for you in the Navy? Was it just pure structure? I mean, was that it, or what do you think? What do you think it left you with?
Many things that it started out that first of all my life where you grew up in the streets, you're judged by what you're wearing. When I was going to high school, I had holes in my shoes. I was embarrassed the way in high school,
Sure.
everybody tries to dress to the nines and look like,
Right.
and they're driving their daddy's car and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm setting pins in bowling alleys till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, coming home, and again, no bathtub and no shower.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting up in the morning and washing up a little bit and going to school, walking like 2 miles to school,
Mm-hmm.
and then falling asleep in study hall and everything. So when I went in the Navy, all of a sudden they shaved my head and everybody else's head was shaved.
Mm-hmm.
We all had on the same clothes.
Hmm.
And for the first time in my life, I was judged by what I could do, not what I was wearing.
Interesting.
That sort of thing. So, and then 3 squares a day. I never had 3 meals a day in my whole life.
Right.
Now they're 3 squares a day. My own bunk, showers. I never had a shower. I could stand under hot water as long as I wanted to. To this day, I get an incredible sense of well-being when I'm in a hot shower and I can let as much water flow on me as I want, and I can go in my closet and see more than one pair of shoes.
Right.
Because in the Navy, I had several pair of shoes, dress shoes and boots and stuff like that. But anyhow,
Mm-hmm.
So that was first part. Then the other part was a discipline. On time, always on time.
Sure.
0600 out of that bunk, and you better be out of that bunk. All the training,
Mm-hmm.
and then the right from day one, marching left, right, left, right. You were taking commands.
Mm-hmm.
To the left flank, ho, right flank, ho, to the rear, ho. You got in the habit of taking commands
Mm-hmm.
that somebody was in charge. So all of that structure was foreign to me, and it was hard to get adjusted to right away. But when I got adjusted to it, I was proud. When I served in the Marine Corps unit, I was in a squadron in the Quonset Point Naval Air Torpedo Unit, and they sent one guy from every squadron to the Marine Corps for training. The outfit was called NEGDF, Naval Emergency Ground Defense Force.
Mm-hmm.
That training really, they kept their foot in my rear end for 9 months. The Marines loved the trained sailors. They loved to just, work the hell out of them,
Mm-hmm.
And there was a time after about 4 months that I might have gone AWOL. I had it. It was
Mm-hmm.
hell week. It was a strict training time where a lack of sleep, hard training. I went back to my bunk that night, and I thought I was going to do one of three things. I was either going to go AWOL
Mm-hmm.
or burst into tears.
Mm-hmm. Just
You know,
broken.
or I was going to stick it out. And I debated, and finally I said, I'm not going to let them know they got me. They got me.
Mm-hmm.
They were they wiped the punk out of you, the street out of you, And from that point on, I began very proud of this outfit that I was in,
Mm-hmm.
and of the guys I served with. I remember the drill instructor after one intensive week of training. He said to me, Dreesen, the rest of your life, you'll judge every man you meet by what I want to be in a foxhole with him when the shit hits the fan.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to him in my foxhole. And from that point, he's been right about that my whole life. I don't do it consciously, but sometimes after I meet a guy, we become friends and stuff. My whole life, I would think, if the shit hit the fan, would I want this guy? Would he have my back?
For
Would
sure.
he have my back? And it's kind of an interesting. Yeah. So that's how much it changed me.
Sure. So, okay, you do your military, it totally changes the way that you are judged and the way you feel like you're judged. All of a sudden you just get this massive injection of structure, discipline, especially, total change from what you had before that. And then you come out after 4 years is what I read, right? You did your 4-year service. Okay. Now here you are. Now you're a young man. You have to get a job. And you've had the childhood now, especially now because you're not a child anymore. So you kind of realize what you had as a kid. You know what I mean? You're not ignorant to, not having a shower and things like that. What do you, I know you did a few various jobs. I know you went into construction. What was that attitude that you had when you got out of the service? You know what I mean? Now you have this new outlook on life. You still don't want to be a comedian yet. That hasn't really bit you yet, I don't think. What was your attitude of like, all right, how am I going to get into the workforce?
Well, I immediately get married. My girlfriend got pregnant, and I was raised Catholic, and my neighborhood, the mantra was all throughout where I grew up at. And the Irish neighborhood, the Italian neighborhood, the African American neighborhood, the Latino neighborhood, we had all different ethnicities where I grew up at. The mantra was always, if a girl gets pregnant, you'll marry her. When I was 13 years old, my mother said, if you get a girl in trouble, you're going to stand by her. I was 13 years old. I said, Mom, 13 years old. But that was the mantra in the neighborhood. So the girl I'm dating gets pregnant, and I don't, none of this again do I regret. So we get married, and in a short time, I'm married. I'm going to have a kid. Now, the other thing, the military and I didn't have a childhood, a teen years like most guys did. I didn't have the college experience or anything like that. So now I'm some nights, I'm working construction and stuff like that. I'm wheeling concrete, pouring sidewalks and basements. I'm a little guy. I'm not a big guy. And then I worked on one time on a big project, a shopping center where I worked with a construction crew where there was like 48 big, heavy-set, strong-looking black guys and me. I was the only white guy there, little skinny white boy. But I did hard labor because I didn't have any trade, But I always tended bar part-time because my mom was a bartender when I was growing up, and I tended bar in my neighborhood. But I started doing a lot of dumb things too, running with some guys, having drinks, going out with Friday night, hanging out with the guys and drinking until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So I wandered from one job to another job to another job. And then I was never fulfilled. I ended up getting a job loading trucks for Jones Motor Company in Chicago, and it was a nationwide trucking firm. And I became a Teamster. After 30 days, I had to drop my card, and I became a Teamster. I got my card after 30 days. And now, after 6 months loading trucks, the company came to me and said, we think you have more on the ball than just loading trucks. We'd like you to be a foreman. So I had to drop my Teamster card and become a foreman of these 60 Teamster guys that I used to be their buddy. And now I was their boss. And that was a real experience because these were tough Irish, Polish, Italian guys from Cicero, Illinois. And 30 of them said, hey, kid, that's a good thing you did it. You're foreman. Yeah, it's good for you. And the other 30 said, I wouldn't work for you. You no good punk. They'd call the union on me. It was really a tough situation that I was involved in. But I finally left there, wandering aimlessly, never knowing what it is I wanted to do. And I honestly, Steve, began to pray. I began to pray. I said, God, what is it I'm supposed to be? This can't be it. I'd be in a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning with my buddies, drinking beer, looking around saying, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belonged. And I began to pray. And I asking God, show me, this must be something. I ended up joining the JCs, a civic group in those days called the Junior Chamber of Commerce. And they were young men of action, ages 18 to 36, who attacked the problems of the community. And they taught you leadership training program. They taught you how to serve on a committee, how to chair a committee, how to form subcommittees, how to Robert's Rules of Order, how to conduct a meeting, how to speak in front of an audience. They had a lot of programs, but it was a lot of leadership. But it was working on problems of the community and solving those problems. So one of the big problems at that time in our community, as it is even today, young people using drugs. And I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor, a concept I had. They weren't teaching drug education in those days at a college or a high school level, let alone at an elementary school level. But I knew you had to get to them at an early age. I did a lot of other things, but I got involved in this. The very first night that I was proposing this project to the JCs, that they would sanction it as a JC project, a young man joined the chapter, a young black man he graduated Norfolk State College, and E.I. DuPont recruited him into Chicago as a marketing representative. And after I made the proposal and the JCs sanctioned and said, yes, run it as a JC project, he came up to me and said, gee, I would like to help you with that. I'm a new member. I just joined tonight. I would like to work with you on that project. I said, thank you, but I got a guy. I had a white friend named John DeBoer. I said, I already got a guy, but thank you very much. And he said, okay. The next day, as fate would have it, mind you, I'm praying now, God, what do you want me to do in life? The next day, John DeBoer calls me and said, I got a new job. I can't help you on that project. I said, gee, what was that black guy's name? Oh, yeah, Tim Reid. So I call him up and we rehearsed the program. We walk into the classroom. And the moment we walked in the classroom, I knew, this was a gift. because the children were black and white. They
Mm-hmm.
were integrated schools. The moment Tim and I walked in the classroom, we played music, we got the kids' attention, and we did jokes off of one another, getting the kids laugh. We got their attention right away.
Right.
And the program became very successful. It became number one in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries. Wherever JCs were, they used it as a model program through their publications.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, a little 8th grade girl walking out of the classroom said, "You guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team."
Mm-hmm.
Never entered my mind nor Tim's. 2 days later, we're sitting at one of the meetings, and I told him a joke. He told me a joke. He said, "Hey, are you thinking about what that little girl said?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Would you do that?" I said, "I'd do it if you do it." We didn't know what to do.
Right.
We became America's first black and white comedy team. There were no comedy clubs in those days.
Sure.
None.
Mm-hmm.
So we became the first black and white comedy team. And we started working what they call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs
Mm-hmm.
all over the country, as well as white nightclubs. I'd be the only white guy in an all-black area, and Tim would be the only black guy in an all-white area. And we paid dues like no other act ever had to pay dues.
Mm-hmm. That's so, yeah. In your book, you totally describe it. It's, I mean, you could have stopped there, and that's impressive. You know what I mean? To so many. Here you are, you just got all this structure from the military, then you get out and you're surviving, you're providing, but at the same time, you're just wishing for, you're praying for direction. And this thing, I don't want to say, I'm definitely not trying to say it falls in your lap, because it did not fall in your lap. But at the same time, it kind of just comes out of nowhere. This guy really wants to get involved, even though you don't have a position for him. And then the next day, your guy drops out, which I didn't realize. That's hilarious to me. So you guys get this, and I believe you guys did this comedy team for like 6 years, right?
Yeah.
Which,
yeah, I had 6 years all over the country.
Right, all over the country. You guys are touring. How? Here you are. Here's my question. So now you're getting into this comedy team, which is the first of its kind. It's a big deal. You're also, I mean, that's a statement in its own. Like I said, it's it's the first black and white, but now you're spending time away from your family. You're getting that sacrifice, which is comedy provides. What was it? I mean, honestly, financially, was it a huge difference from what you're already doing? Was there a big sacrifice like that? Because, was it, hey, I didn't have any direction, didn't like what I was doing in construction and various jobs, but I was providing pretty, I was comfortable, what have it. But here I am, and I just feel totally called to do this, but it's a huge sacrifice with not only my time, I'm away, and it's, I believe in the book, you kind of wrote that you were kind of barely scrounging by, right, when you were doing this comedy team?
Scrounging is even a mild word. The moment I went on stage, the first time I went on stage with Tim, and I got a laugh with something I had written,
Mm-hmm.
It was like an epiphany, like a dark cloud, like a B movie where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts through, and my whole being went, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, this is what I want to do. Oh, I can't even describe that feeling. My whole body lit up. This is what I want to do. I want to be a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
That night, it was a Friday night. I couldn't sleep the whole night.
Mm-hmm.
I tossed and turned all night. I was married. I had a wife and 3 kids at the time. And I got up the next morning, and I couldn't sleep all night. I went down to the church that I had gone to when I was a little boy, where I was an altar boy, and I sang in the choir, and where my mom actually sang in the choir when she was a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to that church, Ascension Church in Harvey, Illinois, and I prayed. There was no one there. I got on my knees. I said, God, I found it. I know what I want. I want to be a comedian.
Yeah.
If you let me make my living as a comedian, I promise I'll do charity work. I was making all these promises.
Yeah.
I knew my whole being the thought that you might make a living making people laugh. I had been making people laugh in bars and behind the bar telling jokes and aboard ship in the service.
Mm-hmm.
I always was a good joke teller, but I never thought that I'd ever be in show business. So I admired comedians too. I used to watch comedians say, wow, that's amazing what they do, But the thought that I might make a living at that. Now, I prayed. I said, God, I'll do charities. Now, that was September 1969.
Mm-hmm.
September 2019, 50 years later, I went back to that same church. And on Sunday, I gave a sermon on the power of prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it quite simple. And I'll get back to your original question, but I just said, look, I said to the congregation, how many of you out there were ever thinking of somebody and you hadn't seen them in a long time, and the phone rings and it's that person.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, I was just thinking about you. And they say, I was just thinking about you too. And
Crazy.
you walk down the street, you have been thinking about a person, you walk down the street, you turn the corner and you haven't seen that person in years. And they're Steve. You go, Steve, you ain't going to believe it. I was just thinking about it. And Steve said, I can't tell you, Tom, I was thinking about you. Now, I said, how many is that? And the whole congregation raised their hand.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if human beings can transfer thought, and obviously we can, then how much thought can be transferred to a supreme being?
Mm-hmm.
It's not rocket science to me. It's just
Mm-hmm.
that's the power of prayer that I really believe in it as a little boy, and I believe in it even to this day. So, that being said, we set out on this journey. Now, keep in mind, there were no comedy clubs in those days.
Yeah.
So we worked all black clubs in the North and the South, all white clubs in the North and the South.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the Vietnam War was raging. You know, I'd gotten out of the service. Tim got out of college. Students were protesting the Vietnam War all over the country, and African Americans were rioting in every major city in the country, feeling disenfranchised from the system.
Hmm.
You know, one of the largest riots in the country was in Harvey, Illinois, where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, right in my neighborhood where I grew up at. Riots, students, upheaval, all that. And in the middle of it all, Tim Reid and I are saying, let's go make some people laugh. You know,
Right.
anywhere there was racial tension, we went. We did 11 prisons in 1 year. We did the county jail in Chicago 3 times in 1 year. We did high schools, colleges, anywhere there was racial tension. We didn't preach. We went and tried to make people laugh. To this day, Steve, Tim will tell you the same thing. I can't tell you how many times, keep in mind that era, that 1969, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. Martin Luther King was assassinated. The Civil Rights Act was passed. We were just 5 years removed from that. You know, people weren't integrating. They could, but they weren't. You know, and here we were going across the land. And I can't tell you how many times after a show somewhere, a young black person would come up, a black guy, and say, you know, I got a white friend that I like, and I'd like to reach out to him. But if I do, the brothers are going to wear me out. But after watching you and Tim today, I'm going to reach out to my white friend. Then a white kid would come and say, you know, I got a black friend, and I really like the guy, but the white guy's going to call me names. But after watching you and Tim, I'm going to reach out to my black friend. That happened more than you'll ever know. I'll take that to my grave as something that I'll always be proud of, that Tim and I were able to accomplish, and sometimes on an individual level. But the irony was, in those days, everybody's saying, you know, we need more race relations. You know, we need more discourse among the races. Tim Reid and I were the only discourse among the races in those days. We were the only one. If you're going to have race relations, that means you have to have race relations. When they were watching Tim and I on stage, we were having race relations. We were doing comedy. Now, we weren't preaching, you know, but you saw two guys getting along that liked one another.
I mean, okay, I can only imagine how validating that is. So here you get the laugh from doing, you know, your first, not comedy duo, but just your first anything with Tim Reid. So you get the laugh, you get bit by that bug, right? That, you know, you go to your church, you literally pray on your knees, you're making all these promises like, I got to do this. I got to do this. And then you get this, I don't want to call it a bonus, but just this absolute plus of, like you said, you're making a difference. It's a race thing. It's, you know what I mean? You guys have this relationship. Like you said, you're not just preaching. It's a byproduct of your comedy show. I can only imagine how great that was. I mean, how blessed you must have felt. What, you know, you guys did it for 6 years. I know it was, from what you said in your book, right? That's all I can go off of. But you said it was kind of this, I don't know, you know, I believe you said it ended as suddenly as it started. What do you think that was from? Because, I mean, 6 years is a long time, you know, it's not a lifetime, but it's not, you know, it's an intentional time is what I would say. It wasn't like somebody just got hot for a year and then they faded. 6 years is a chunk of time, you know? So here you guys, it ended after 6 years. What exactly happened? What happened? You know, why did it end?
Well, first of all, it was devastating to me, absolutely devastating. Tim had a wife and 2 kids. I had a wife and 3 kids. We were having a hard time feeding the family, making enough money, so on and so on. But I had a dream that Tim Reid and I were going to become the greatest comedy team of all time. That was what I wanted, you know, to be as successful as Martin and Lewis and everybody else, you know. And Tim wanted to be more of an actor, and he also he wanted to be a stand-up comedian as well, but he um, he started getting disillusioned toward and it was very difficult. We're fighting for gigs all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we opened for Della Reese, a singer, and her and Tim started having an affair. I'm not telling stories out of school. We wrote this in a book. Tim Reid and I wrote a book years ago called Tim and Tom: An American Comedy in Black and White,
Mm-hmm.
and which has now may become a miniseries on Netflix. They're pitching it as possibly doing a 6 1-hour miniseries, and two guys played Tim and I,
Wow.
and what we endured during that era, that period.
Crazy.
But yeah, and we're the best of friends to this day. I love this guy. He's like a brother to me, and you know, when we see each other, we hug each other. His children call me Uncle Tom. You know, I've been
Right.
their Uncle Tom since they were born, which is a
Sure.
funny story in itself. You know, they call me Uncle Tom. But at that time, the frustrations were coming in, not enough work and not getting the recognition that we thought we deserved. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
and you know, Tim Della Reese took him off to the West Coast. Tim left his wife for a while, and next thing you know, he's going to get a divorce, and he ends up staying with Della Reese up in Bel Air, and I'm on the south side of Chicago. You know, anyhow,
Mm-hmm.
we did one last gig together, and I just now I'm devastated. You know, I don't
Right.
know what I'm going to do. My ex-wife, what was her name again? Oh yeah, Plaintiff. Uh,
Yeah. Okay.
she she's she wanted me out of the business. She hated show business, and I don't blame her. She didn't marry a guy in show business. She married a working stiff like her dad. Her dad worked in
Mm-hmm.
a factory 40 years and never missed a day. Got a check
Right.
every Friday on that table. There was a check. Here I'm in this precarious business. Sometimes we'd have money coming in for a month and a half. You know, she wanted me out of the business always. She always thought it was a dumb idea.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, Tim's wife Rita thought it was a wonderful idea, and she was very supportive of us. You know, but
Mm-hmm.
so my wife wanted me out of the business. So now when the team wakes up, she thinks I'm now going to give up. But I'm sitting in a bar one night thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. My buddy owned a bar called the Soki, and I used to attend bar there, and I actually was a bouncer there. One time I checked ID cards and
Mm-hmm.
stopped fights all the time, you know. But anyhow, I had 2 beers in front of me because people were buying drinks, and when they kept buying more drinks, they put shot glass in front of you, so you had like more coming, you know. I'm
Right.
sitting here drinking beer, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And I was always good at alternatives. I said, I can either get another black guy and do the same act,
Mm-hmm.
or I can get a job in the factory and please my wife and give up this dream of being a
Mm-hmm.
comedian, or I can go it alone and try to be a stand-up on my own. And sitting at that bar, I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
go it alone. And like I always set goals and things. I said, my goal is to get on the Tonight Show. In 1975, wherever you went in America, people say, what do you do for a living? You say, I'm a stand-up comedian. The
Mm-hmm.
next question out of their mouth was, oh yeah, you ever been on Johnny Carson? If you
Right.
had been on Johnny Carson in the eyes of America, you just weren't a comedian. You might want to be one, you might going to be one, but you weren't one now. So that was I sat at that bar and I said, my goal is to get enough material, a monologue, and write monologues that I could get on the Tonight Show.
Mm-hmm.
Because one appearance on the Tonight Show, Freddie Prinze got a sitcom the next day.
Right.
Everybody knew.
Yeah.
26 million people watched that show.
Mm-hmm.
26 million people. You score on that show, you're on your way.
Right.
So I'm in a bar in Harvey, Illinois. This goes through my mind. I'm going to make it on the Tonight Show. And I start thinking, what could stop me if I wanted to do this? I read a book by W. Clement Stone many years ago called Positive Mental Attitude. And in the book, he said, if you know what you want in life, and if it's a noble endeavor, search your life. See if there's anything in your life that can deter you from that noble achievement and get it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it and I said, what could stop me if I wanted to make it and get to the Tonight Show and make it as a stand-up comedian? And I looked in front of me, it was alcohol, beer.
Mm-hmm.
I love to drink. I love drinking beer. And I could have been an alcoholic like my dad or like my mom was at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, alcohol. You can't wake up with hangovers and write material. You
Right.
can't get drunk at night and every now and then get in a fight every now and then, because I grew up in that kind of neighborhood, you know. You can't go on stage with a broken nose and a black eye, you know.
Right.
But it was all about alcohol, you know. And I said, that's it. I quit. And I pushed the 2 beers across the bar, and my buddy, who was Jimmy Lepore, an Italian kid, He came up. He said, "Through for the night, Tommy?" I said, "I quit." He said, "You quit for tonight?" I said, "I quit."
Mm-hmm.
He said, I said, "I quit drinking." He went, "Yeah, right. I'll see you here tomorrow night."
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I never touched another drop till after I was doing the Tonight shows. And then I tried to drink a little bit, and I didn't like it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this to young comedians all the time. This is the most important organ in your body as a comedian. Don't destroy this brain with drugs and alcohol. I've
Mm-hmm.
known 5 comedians who committed suicide. I knew another 20 to 25 that through drugs and alcohol committed suicide. When you walk out on those stages, you got to be fresh. You got to feel good. It's like an athlete.
Yeah.
I began to run marathons. I ran marathons. I was running all the time, staying in shape, playing basketball in the league. I played in the softball, fast pitch league, in the showbiz league till I was 58 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to be in shape to go on this journey.
Sure.
I'm going to walk out in front of 20,000 people, and they all came to see Frank Sinatra, and I'm going to walk out there with a hangover.
Right.
Something, you got to be sharper. Anyhow, that's a long answer to a very short question.
No, and I mean, obviously, you're leading right to my next section. You go to LA, and I feel like I've talked to a lot of individuals, right? Okay, so full transparency. Obviously, this podcast is still pretty small. I'm still trying to grow it. I too am in construction. I'm a commercial electrician. Similar thing, right? It's done great for me. I can't really complain, but I don't really feel called to do that. It's been very hard to do stand up, right? Because it's total opposite scheduling. But I've kind of been able to do this podcast, and I found it's totally different, but I also love it in itself. So I can totally not so much relate. I mean, I guess relate, but I can really appreciate you sitting at a bar, pushing away the beers, you going to LA, which back then was a big deal. I mean, it still is a big deal, but going to LA and essentially just making the statement of I'm all in on this, this comedy, this dream that I have, all in. And you get to LA and it was not a smooth start. It wasn't like you got to LA and everything just exploded. You did a lot. I mean, what can you say? When you first got to LA, where was your mind at there? What kind of happened when you first got here?
Well, first of all, I lied to my wife. I told her I had one gig in Houston with Tim, and that was our last gig. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go to LA for a couple of weeks, work on a couple things, and I'll be home. And she thought, okay, you're going to be home to get a job and change your whole lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But I got there, and I had a friend who let me use her house. She let me house sit because she was a singer that I had gotten the job. And she let me stay at her house for a couple of weeks while she was on the road.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, talking to my wife on a payphone every now and then, she realized that I wasn't going to quit show business.
Right.
She wrote a letter to that house. I told her where I was at. Dear John. She said, "This is your dream, not mine. I'm never moving to California. I wish you the best, but count me out of it. I'm done."
Mm-hmm.
And that devastated me.
Sure.
Meanwhile, I'm hitchhiking every night to the comedy store. I had no car, and I'm begging to get on at the comedy store. And you couldn't just get on. You had to know somebody that knew somebody. But and I would, like anybody else, they'd have an open mic night. And anyhow, so it took me almost a month before Mitzi gave me an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, before that, this girl comes back home. She says, "You can't stay here. My boyfriend is very jealous, insanely jealous, and so you have to leave." I said to her, "Pat, I don't have any place to go." And finally, she said, "I've got a back room. Come in the back door." There was a mattress on the floor and a lamp without a shade, a lamp that had no shade. And she said, "Come in the back door. My boyfriend never stays the night." Mm-hmm. She said, "But if you see his car in front, don't come in."
Right.
So some nights I'd walk around till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning before the guy would leave, And one night there was a party in the neighborhood, so they had valet parking. I didn't see his car in front because he parked it like 2 blocks away. Mm-hmm. I go in the back door. He's sleeping on the couch, thinks I'm a burglar. He jumps up. He's petrified. Now when he realizes, she said, "Oh, that's my friend." He said, "Your friend? Why don't I know about it?" He was a real insanely jealous guy. Right. And I'm trying to tell him. I'm talking to him. I'm saying to the guy, "Please." I said, "She's helping me out." "Yeah. How's she helping you? Yeah. How you paying her?" And he's implying that we're having an affair, and we weren't. And I'm trying to tell him she's just a nice person. She's crying, sobbing. He's like an insane guy, and I'm trying to tell him, "Look, she's helping me." I said, "I got a wife and 3 kids back in Illinois. I'm trying to make it as a comedian. I'm struggling." And he kept accusing and accusing her, and finally, I lost it. I couldn't take it anymore. It was one of those moments where I'm in. That day I had been rejected, I don't know how many times. Now this, I said to him, all right, Mr. Tough Guy, let's go outside.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I said, you're tough. You're a tough guy. You want to beat me up because you think her and I are having an affair. We're not. But your sick mind hopes we're having an affair because you're a sick guy.
Right.
You can't believe that this is a decent human being, your girlfriend, and that I'm a decent guy, and that it was just a favor. So you want to fight? Let's go outside and let's see how tough you are. And I walked out the back door. I said, come on. And at that point, Steve, I might have killed her. I mean, I was so angry, and the whole world was down on me. Fortunately, he didn't come outside. Maybe he'd have killed me. I don't know. But but he was just all mouth. But nonetheless, when I'm out there, Pat now comes and she starts throwing all my clothes out. And Tommy, damn you, them. And then now she's throwing all my clothes out with all my possessions. And she slammed the door. And I remember it broke a little pane in the window of when she slammed the door so hard. I have no place to go. There's a car in the alley on blocks that had been there when I dumped the garbage. It was up on blocks, an old Nash Rambler where the front seat came down. I ended up sleeping in that car for over a month, hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, washing up in a gas station every day,
Right.
But I finally got on at the Comedy Store. Mitzi liked me. I passed the audition. The pressure there. The first Tonight Show was a lot of pressure, but for Mitzi Shore, those days, there was no improvisation. There was no Laugh Factory. There was one game in town,
Right.
the Comedy Store on Sunset Boulevard. The energy there was incredible. People were getting discovered every night. And now, if she says, I don't like you, it's back to Harvey, Illinois.
Right.
But I did 6-7 minutes. I came off stage. She said, well, I can see you've had some experience. We'll work you into the schedule. And the rest is, I became a regular and worked my way into the mainstream of the Comedy Store, working from 1 o'clock in the morning to midnight to finally getting in prime time and finally being one of the stars of the Comedy Store. And then I ended up getting a TV show in Canada, took that money, went into Chicago, opened for Fats Domino at Mr. Kelly's in Chicago, and got great reviews there, and talked my wife into her and the kids coming back with me and coming back to California. And then even that was a struggle coming back.
So, okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I understand it was a different time, but also because your childhood, things like hitchhiking, sleeping in a car for a month, people don't do that. Okay. People don't do that. I think that says not only just how, I don't want to say desperate, but how committed you were, right? I mean, people don't do that, period. Let alone, I mean, even back then, and for sure 100% today. I've heard the story of Jay Leno slept in his car as well. There's a lot of guys that came out here and literally were, just basically homeless, had nothing, and ended up making it big. And also, I want your real quick question, and then we'll kind of continue with your story. But what do you feel like, we'll get into the Tonight Show. We're talking about the Comedy Store right now. I feel like, kind of from what I've heard from other podcasts and things like that, there was less comedians. It was a smaller world. Obviously, there was no social media, but and it was kind of not more volatile, but I think there was a lot of jealousy with comedians from what I've heard and just kind of listened, because the portals were almost guarantees, like the Tonight Show. If you killed on the Tonight Show, like you said, it's like you're going to get a deal. Your career is made. And to get on the Tonight Show, you had to kill at the Comedy Store. That was the place. So here you have this really tight funnel. It's much more of a guarantee, but you have it's harder to get into that. You know what I mean? And there's less comedians back then, I would say. What do you think about that compared to now, where you could start a podcast, you could do, you know what I mean? There's social media, you could do all this different stuff.
First of all, I didn't sleep in my car. I slept in an abandoned car.
Right.
It's the difference of having your own car. I slept in an abandoned car, but because I didn't have a car. If I had a car, but when you say there were less comedians, I was going on stage every night with all these unknown comedians: David Letterman, Robin Williams, Jay Leno, Gallagher, Michael Keaton, Elaine Boozler. The girl waiting tables was Deborah Winger.
Crazy.
This was a powerful group of kids and young people. But I also had a lot more experience than them. I had years in the military. I had the JC experience. So I was a little more mature than some of them. And Dave Letterman talks about it all the time. He always, whenever they interview him about us, he'll say things like that. Tom was a little bit more, he had a few more years and a couple more years, but also a little more maturity. And I had already been with the comedy team for 6 years.
Right.
So I had some experience and stage presence and stuff like that. But it still was a struggle because, again, if Mitzi didn't like you, you're going home. It's over.
Right.
But every night at that comedy store, somebody was getting discovered. Every night, somebody said, I got the Merv Griffin show. I got the Dinah Shore show. I got the Tonight Show or something, you know.
Crazy.
And I never felt competition. And one of the things that I tell young comedians all the time, I say that the worst thing you can ever do in any endeavor, but especially as a comedian, is to compare yourself to another comedian. To say, Steve and I started out together, and Steve's doing the Kimmel show, and I started out with him, and I can't even get an audition. The worst thing you do is compare yourself to another comedian. There's a great Hindu proverb, and it's also given, sometimes they give credit to Ernest Hemingway said it, but it said, there's nothing noble about being superior to another man. True nobility lies in being superior to your former self. Am I a better friend than I was last year? Am I a better son than I was last year? Am I a better father? Am I a better comedian than I was last year? That's your only competition. Listen to your tapes. Have I grown? You know, I was never in competition with Jay Leno or David Letterman. They were my friends, my peers, and we hung together. But I only wanted to be the best Tom Dreesen I could be as a comedian. You know, Jay and David and I, if I was watching them work and they watched me, and they were doing a piece of material that I thought, oh, I know a good tag, that I would tell them afterward. You know what you should say after? And they do the same for me. You know, we kind of had a little camaraderie more than most people. And Chicago comedians, I've always felt, had far more camaraderie than New York or LA comedians, far less envy. I always felt they were more supportive. That's just my opinion, you know.
Interesting.
But I came from that ilk. I loved comedians before I was one. I wanted to help other comedians. I wanted to, any way I could make your load lighter. You know, this is not a 10K, this comedy world. This is my 51st year of being a comedian.
Right.
And I was always looking at the long run. You know, there's a lot of hills and valleys on the you know, Glenn Campbell had a great song, "The Rhinestone Cowboy." He said, "On the load to my horizon, there'll be a load of compromising on the road to my horizon." You know?
I mean, it's very true, especially something as volatile as, you know, show business and stuff like that, where you can have huge highs and then devastating lows. I think that speaks a lot to your character, right? Just as a young kid, I think that's super. You just lack insecurities, and I think I know when I start doing that with, like you said, with anything, would it be with other podcasts or whatever, it's totally based on insecurities and lack of confidence. So I could totally appreciate that advice.
Well, by the way, I had insecurities too. I mean, I felt those things. I had those negative thoughts, but I learned how to fight them off through those books I read, and through there's a great book called Self-Talk by Shad Helmstetter, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. I mean, I had so many rejections. That's why my book is called Still Standing,
right? Because
I'm a stand-up comedian, 51 years, but I've been knocked down a lot in my life physically, knocked down as well as literally knocked down, and I keep getting back up again, you know, and that's what this business is about. Bertrand Russell once said something so profound. He said, there are people in show business who become major stars simply because they didn't have sense enough to quit when they should have.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So, okay. Keep the story going. You finally get in front. You kind of get a rhythm going at the Comedy Store. How and what was that like when you finally got on the Tonight Show, which it must have been just absolute surreal. You know what I mean? I would imagine you thought about that night in the bar, you push the beers away. You're like, I'm going to get on the Tonight Show. And then here you are, you actually get the opportunity. What was that like?
Well, I hounded the hell out of them. Craig Tennis and Paul Black. I played softball against them. We had the Comedy Store, had a softball team. We played against the Tonight Show, and I was doing all sorts of tricks to get their attention. Because again, I was a former salesman. But I finally got Craig Tennis to come and see me one night, and that night he was looking at a comedy team called Bauman Eston and a new kid named Billy Crystal. Okay, you know, I don't know whatever happened to Billy Crystal, but I'm on your show right now, Steve, so he can eat his heart out.
Yeah,
but
100%.
Anyhow, they finally come to see me, and it's a Tuesday night. Now, the biggest fear comedians have is if you're going to do an audition, that you'll have a small crowd. And a Tuesday night wasn't a big night at the Comedy Store, so I'm thinking, God, I hope they have more than 20 people so I can, show this guy what I can do.
Sure.
I pull up in front of the Comedy Store, and there's like 120 people out in front of the Comedy Store. I go, wow. On a Tuesday night, what I don't know is Billy Crystal is being managed by Rollins and Jaffe, one of the biggest management teams in show business. They manage Woody Allen.
Mm-hmm.
They end up managing David Letterman, and so many other big stars. And they're managing Billy Crystal. He's a new guy, but they brought all these people to the Comedy Store,
Mm-hmm.
all the TV shows, all the casting people. I go, oh my God, I'm going to go on in front of this great crowd. But what I didn't know, their management said, no one goes in until Billy goes on. They kept all those people outside the Comedy Store.
Really?
And I don't blame them. Yeah, well, they didn't bring those people there to get Tom Dreesen a career.
Huh.
You know what I mean? Or Bauman Esten. They brought those people for their clients. So they kept their people outside till Billy what's going on. I go on in front of like 20 people,
Mm-hmm.
Craig Tennis came inside, and I scored. I did a good set, about 20 minutes. When I came off, he said to me, come to my office tomorrow at the Tonight Show.
Mm-hmm.
I went the next day. He said, he's at his desk. He said, I saw your 20 minutes. Show me what 5 you would do if I gave you the Tonight Show. So I got up and I'd do this bit, do that bit. He said, take that one out, put another joke in it.
Mm-hmm.
I did it. And finally he said, okay, you got it.
Really?
You're on next Tuesday.
On that day?
You're on next Tuesday.
Wow.
He said, 1 week from today, you're on. I go back and I tell the whole world, I'm going on the Tonight Show. I'm going to Tonight Show. Blah, blah, blah. I'm calling home and I'm telling everybody back home, back in all the bars back at home and all my brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going on the Tonight Show next Tuesday. Everybody in Chicago's watching. Not everybody, but
it feels like it, I'm sure.
I get to the Tonight Show, boy, I tell you, I've got the bit down. I'm rehearsing. I go, you put you in makeup. I'm in makeup. Then they take you up to your dressing room, and then moments later they bring you down to your green room, and you wait. And I was in the green room. And they came in the green room and said, "We ran out of time. You got to come back next week."
Right.
I come back a week from there. I go into makeup. Meanwhile, I haven't eaten for a week. I'm still. I get the makeup. I go to my dressing room. They bring me down to the green room. We ran out of time. They did this to me 3 times in a row. On the 4th
Ouch.
time, I'm in the green room. I'm in the makeup room getting made up. And Fred DeCordova, the producer, came in. He said, I got bad news for you. I said, what? He said, you're going on tonight. Now.
Really?
Yeah. Now,
just devastating.
After that, 26 million people are going to watch you tonight. When they come to get you out of that green room, they take that long walk to take you behind that curtain. Not
Mm-hmm.
only do 26 million people watch that show, but talent coordinators from Las Vegas, bookers from Vegas, agents all across the land watched that show.
Right.
It was, television was only this big in those days.
Right.
It wasn't cable and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they come and get me out of the green room, take that long walk, all the stagehands. Later, when I became a veteran, they go, hey, Dreesen, how you doing? How's your Cubs? Hey, how you doing, Tommy? That first time, they all turn their back and they whisper, it's his first time. It's his first time. You get behind that curtain.
Mm-hmm.
Doc Severson's playing music because they're in commercial break.
Mm-hmm.
Coordinator to Craig Tennis said, Tommy, are you okay? Yeah, he said, okay, buddy. He said, knock him dead. He leaves you alone, and now I'm back there, and I can't remember the first joke. What was it? Oh, yeah, now you're going, now you're talking to God one-on-one. Oh, God. Oh, get me through this. Get me through this. I need to score here tonight. Now, meanwhile, you realize my mother has got everybody in Harvey, Illinois watching the show. If I bomb, I can't even go back home,
Mm-hmm.
And now the lights come on, the screen, the music stops because we're out of commercial break.
Mm-hmm.
And we're live now. And you see the screens light up, and they have a guy back there. He's going to open the curtain for you to go out.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny says, we're back now. And I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight because my next guest is making his first appearance on The Tonight Show. Would you welcome, please, Tom Dreesen? Now, that one line, Steve, I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight. He only does it on your first time. Welcome, Tom Dreesen. I go through the curtain.
Interesting.
Bright lights, I can't see the audience. Bright lights, they got a spot on the floor you hit. They're applauding. I get that first joke out, gets a laugh. I get the second joke, gets a laugh. Get the third joke. Now I get applause. I did a fourth joke. I hear Johnny and Ed McMahon laughing behind me. Now I get applause. I got 8 applause. I'm at the end of my monologue, and I killed them. I really had a set. I said, you've been a wonderful audience. This is my first appearance on The Tonight Show. Show business is a tough life. So if you like me, just if you like me and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me, will you please? I go through the curtain. I go. They're applauding. The coordinator comes running around the corner. He goes, "Go back, Johnny wants you to go back. Go back." I said, "Go back and talk to Johnny." Don't go back and talk to Johnny. Just go back. So I go back through the curtain and Johnny gives you that circle,
Yeah.
and I never stopped working from that night. I did 61 appearances on the Tonight Show after that. After that, I was doing Dinah Shore, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Johnny Carson, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train. I'm the only white comedian ever to do Soul Train. I did American Bandstand. I was doing $20,000 Pyramid, Hollywood Squares, Match Game. I was touring with Sammy Davis Jr. I never stopped working since that night.
So you go out, you can't even see the audience. I mean, the white lights, they have the spot. And while you're just, I mean, that monumental pressure, right? From sleeping in some random car, hitchhiking down Sunset, it was hard enough just to get into the Comedy Store. And then now you're here. You beat all the odds. You're actually doing it. And then you kill it. You do really well. That walk that night after, that walk home, that whatever, what was that? That must have just been, I mean, cloud nine.
Not only cloud nine, tears of joy. Thank you, God. This is what I prayed for.
Yeah.
This is what I wanted. This one, but there's a song, One Moment in Time. Whitney Houston sang it, but there's a girl named Dana Winter. If you ever get a chance, download it. Dana Winter. She sings the hell out of that song, but it said, when all of my dreams they're praying that one moment in time. Give me that one moment in time. When all of my dreams are a heartbeat away and the answers are all up to me. This is it. I'm behind that curtain. That one, if I seize that moment, this is it. My life will change. Baseball players have told me about it, basketball players, athletes, that their career was going nowhere and everything, but there was a moment that if they scored tonight, if they hit that ball out tonight, if they that touchdown or whatever, they seized the moment. And that's what I realized that I had that one moment in time and I seized that moment. The stars were lined up right or whatever it was, but I was ready. And what good is a break if you're not ready when the break comes?
Right.
I paid dues. I paid a lot of dues, but again, it could have been a bad crowd that night. I did 61 appearances on the Tonight Show. There were nights that wasn't the hottest crowd where you had to dig in and work. Right. That night they were right here and they were with me all along, and I thank God for that. But.
So okay, now you never stopped working after that night. What was the first step towards that? What was that first gig? What was the first call you got? And you just thought, all right, here we go. What started the ball rolling?
Well, Sammy Davis, I did Sammy Davis Jr.'s show called Sammy and Company. And I did a whole routine about growing up in a black neighborhood, playing basketball on an all-black basketball team. I had Sammy on the floor laughing. He said to me on the show, he said, I'm taking you on the road with me. So that was a big break. Never working Las Vegas, and all of a sudden I'm in Las Vegas on the marquee with Sammy Davis Jr.
Right.
My name is on the marquee, Tom Dreesen. He made sure they put my name up there big. He was such a good guy. That was a break. But also, all of a sudden, all kinds of singers wanted me because in those days, they needed a comedian to open for them that could work clean because they brought in family audiences. So Gladys Knight and the Pips, Natalie Cole, Mac Davis, Tony Orlando and Dawn, Frankie Avalon, James Darren. These are people that are calling me for gigs. I was working all the time, running all over. When I wasn't working with Sammy, I was working with them. Smokey Robinson. I toured with Smokey Robinson for years. They're all calling me. I was working so much. I remember, I would tell a story. I was one day on a plane going east, and I looked out the window and I saw myself on a plane going west.
Right.
As I said, I think I'm working too much. I'm being facetious, of course. But when you were poor as I was all those years and struggling for jobs all those years, and all of a sudden the phone doesn't stop ringing, you take every single job that comes your way to a fault. Pretty soon you've got yourself, you're working yourself to death. I had to take some time off every now and then. But it was unbelievable. People recognizing you in airports. It's funny. I did a joke on Soul Train, and I did it on the Tonight Show about the black guy. So my neighbor Gucci, Everett Nicholson, my buddy, I made him famous. I did a lot of jokes about him, my black friend from back home. But I said how tough Gucci was. I said, but Gucci was smart. I said, some of the black guys in my neighborhood weren't that smart because they thought I was a Chinese guy named Say Fool. I said, every day I walk by, they'd holler, "Say Fool." Well, that got such a huge laugh on Soul Train and all those shows that when I would go through airports, black people would see me and they didn't remember my name, but they'd holler, "Say, fool!" Sammy Davis Jr. would take my name off the dressing room door and he'd put "Say, fool" up there, as my name.
No, you
So
just
I mean, but
yeah.
it was a whole new world. I mean, being recognized, wanting you to work with them, corporate dates, because you could work clean. Corporations didn't want a comedian that worked blue. And for your audience who doesn't understand what blue is in comedy, it's working using swear words or sexual innuendos. They call that working blue. So a whole world opened up to me, really a whole world.
What was it like? Because you did a 14-year stint and kind of, especially about your book, you started opening up for Frank Sinatra, which, if you want to talk about a celebrity, I mean, Frank Sinatra's all-time high, right? And then now you're opening for him, which must have not only, I could tell you're the type of guy that would probably just, and as you wrote in your book, just always felt appreciated for the opportunity. And then here you are again, just a surreal moment. What was the first night that you opened for him, or even just that conversation that that first conversation you had with him?
What happened was I was working with Smokey Robinson at Caesars in Lake Tahoe, and Frank was working next door at Harrah's, and I had worked Harrah's many times. By this time, I'm a veteran comedian. I've done a lot of TV and I'm doing a lot of stage stuff. So I wanted to go see his show because I had seen him once in Chicago at an arena, and I never saw anything like that in my life. He created more excitement walking to the microphone than most people did with their whole act.
Yeah.
Just walking on the stage, the crowd would just go wild. So I wanted to catch that opening. And I came off stage one night at Caesars in Lake Tahoe. If you know Lake Tahoe, there's Caesars, a casino, and then Harrah's. So I came off stage, didn't even change out of my stage clothes, and I ran fast as I could over to Harrah's, and I was running into the showroom because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. And outside the showroom was the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson. And he was talking to a big heavyset guy with a cigar. And he called me over. He said, "Tommy, come here." And I reluctantly went over because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening, So he said, "Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin." Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer, a very powerful guy himself. And he said, "Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen. I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra." And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he heard it a million times. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. He said, "Hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? I said, "Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000?
Right.
He started laughing. He said, "I like this kid." A week later, they called me. "Would you work 1 week with Frank at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City?" And I said, "Yeah," because I figured I'll get my picture taken with him. I'll hang in every bar in Chicago. And that's it. I never thought anything more than that. And the second night I was with him, he and his wife Barbara took me out to dinner, and we're in the middle of dinner. I can remember like it was yesterday. He set his knife and his fork down, and he looked at me. He said, "I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested." And I didn't say, "Let me check my calendar." I said, "Oh, yeah." And it turned into 14 years of 45, 50 cities a year, a friendship that I'll never, ever forget. I stayed in his home 6 times a year. I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and I spoke at his funeral, and I miss him every day of my life.
What do you think? I mean, again, another surreal moment. Here you are. What do you think the biggest step up was with that, right? Was it purely financial? Was it just the experience? Was it hanging out with that energy level of Frank Sinatra? Like you said, he could just walk out into a crowd, onto a stage, and just that energy. What do you think the biggest noticeable step up was? Or not even up, but just the biggest difference. You know what I mean? Comparing
one major difference, but also when I was growing up, if in the bars and all the saloons and everything, Sinatra was on all those jukeboxes. If you said to a street guy, if you said to me, you played a word association game with me, and you said baseball, I'd say Cubs. If you said love, I'd say Mom. If you said show business, I'd say Frank Sinatra.
Right.
Sammy Davis, Dean Martin. That was show business, live entertainment. Not television, because I didn't have television as a kid. We lived in a shack. We didn't have a TV. Everybody else did. We did. So that, to me, was the epitome of show business, Frank Sinatra. And so now all of a sudden I'm flying in this private jet. Limousines are picking me up at the door. 2 big guys come down, carry all my luggage. They'd carry me down if I wanted to be carried down. Put you in the limo, they drive you right out to the airport, to the private jet, right out onto the tarmac. You'd get out of the limo and go aboard the private jet. The moment Frank stepped on board, let's go. He had a pilot named Johnny Spots. He'd say, "Let's go, Spots." And that pre-flight, all that shit better be done.
Right.
Like fueling. Let's go. We'd take off down the runway the moment he got on the plane. You'd land, squad cars and limousines rush you to the arena. You'd do your show, squad cars and limousines rush you away from the arena to the private jet. You'd be flying over the venue. People weren't even in their cars yet.
Mm-hmm.
We were on our way to the next city. That was one of the major changes. The other was that 20,000 people, 40,000 people in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Do you know what that's like for a comedian? I'll tell you this, Steve. This is what I'll say to you. This is what it's like. I'll pick any of those arenas, but say the Nassau Coliseum in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 5 minutes before showtime, Steve. And you're opening for Frank Sinatra. And I say, Steve, this is what I want you to do. There's 20,000 people out there. I want you to go out there. And for the next 40 minutes, I want you to hold their attention. They're in the round. They're all around you. They're not only just in front of you per se, they're behind you.
Right.
So you're in the round. They're all around. 20,000 people in this arena. You're in the center.
Mm-hmm.
Steve, I want you to go out there, and for the next 40 minutes, I want you to hold their attention.
Right.
One more thing, Steve. I want you to hold their attention, but I want you to make them laugh
Right.
for 40 minutes. Oh, one more thing, Steve. I want you to hold their attention, but I want you to make them laugh when you want them to laugh. I want you to pull the strings on the emotions of 20,000 people. No props, no tricks, no charts, no special arrangement, no special lighting, no orchestra. Just
Right.
you and 20,000 people. And one more thing, Steve. Not one of them came to see you.
Right. I didn't even.
Now,
yeah.
That's my point. You said to me, "What's the major difference?" That was the major difference. That was huge, major difference. Because, Steve, if I went to the Laugh Factory tonight and I did 40 minutes of stand-up comedy,
mm-hmm.
and I took that in front of 140 people, say, and I took that same exact 40 minutes
Mm-hmm.
in front of Sinatra, 20,000 people, that whole dynamic changes the comedy dynamic. It's a totally different dynamic now. It's the same material, but now there's 20,000 people. So you have to learn that pacing, learn how to bring them into you first.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really a skillful operation. A lot of comedians have tried that, and Frank didn't use them.
Right.
I lucky I was pretty much of a veteran when I met him.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'd go out on stage, some people would recognize me because I was doing TV shows,
mm-hmm.
but they came to see Frank Sinatra. They didn't come to see me.
Right.
You were an intrusion, and you had to win them over, or
right.
he couldn't keep you. So I do tricks,
Right. When do you think? I don't want to say routine, but how many shows in, or what's that length of time with Frank Sinatra to where you felt like, okay, I think I got this. You know what I mean? Obviously, you have that respect for each and every show. But when do you think you got that routine of like, all right, I'm not freaking out every show. You know what I mean?
Well, I didn't freak out, period. I learned how to quiet the mind. And all those PMA things that I do for people, I practice on myself. And I tell young comedians all the time, the reason why most of you are frightened and stage fright at first, because whenever you think of going on stage, you think of the negative. What if this doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? What if that joke bombed? And your hands start to sweat, your heart starts to pound, because the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between truth or fiction. You just send a picture to your subconscious mind
mm-hmm.
of a failure.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them, see yourself scoring. See the people loving you.
Mm-hmm.
See the people laughing at you. See yourself calm. What kind of comedian do you want to be? I want to be a calm, relaxed, in control comedian.
Mm-hmm.
I would see that, feel that, and believe that. I would see that, feel that, and believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And before the show, you're always tense. You're a little bit nervous. It's a big job. But when that light hit me, I would always think, when the light hits me, it will become a tranquil light. Calm will come over me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another saying: act as if you are, and you will be.
Mm-hmm.
Act as if you are, and you will be. So if you want to be a calm, confident comedian, act as if you are
mm-hmm.
a calm, confident comedian. So that was, the things that I had to do to. And again, I want to tell you, I used to do tricks. When you walk out in front of 20,000 people, 3,000 are still trying to find their seats.
Right.
So you've got to bring that focus to you right now. And a lot of them thought Frank was coming out because the orchestra was in the pit, and the lights would go down low, and you would hear ba ba da da ba, and they'd go, oh, they think Frank is coming out.
Right.
But ladies and gentlemen, welcome the comedy star of our show, Tom Dreesen. I go, oh, But when I'd get up there, and the first thing I would do, I'd say, how many of you out there applaud? I want you to applaud. How many of you out there thought Frank Sinatra was coming out? Applaud. And they would applaud. I'd say, I know just how you feel. I'm a little bit disappointed myself. The joke is on me, right? Notice
Right.
I didn't say raise your hand. I said applaud. Then I'd
Mm-hmm.
say, how many of you out there in this arena for your very first time? Applaud. They'd applaud. You see what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing? I'm bringing them into me now. I'm bringing them to the
Right.
center. I'd say, how many of you out there are seeing Frank Sinatra live? Your very first time, applaud. And they'd applaud.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say, how many of you out there aren't wearing any underwear? Applaud. Just throwaway line. I talk, you react. I talk, you react. I talk. I'm doing this all the way around the arena.
Right.
I'm bringing the focus in. I'm not opening with my A material.
Right.
It would go to waste.
Right.
I'd always write a couple jokes about that community, something
Mm-hmm.
about their mayor, about the governor, something that I realized that they would all relate to, they'd know about. And I'd do a couple of local jokes about
Mm-hmm.
your local police department. I got a police escort here, and I have a couple jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd go into my A material.
Right.
But now I got them here. I got them
Right.
focused on me.
It's that that level, and manipulation is not the right word, I don't think completely, but that level of control that you have to have. And I didn't even think about that. The fact that you're coming out as a downer because they think it's Sinatra. You know what I mean? And like you said, they're not coming to see you. So you're already down, you're already a step down right when you come out. Okay. That's first of all, that's gonna be super difficult, no matter I don't care who you talk to, that's gonna be super difficult. Okay, so now you toured with him for 14 years. What years were those? When did you start? When did you end? What year?
1982 to 1996.
Okay, so Frank Sinatra, you stopped touring with Frank Sinatra, and you were there for his last show, I believe, right?
Yeah, I was there when he sang the very last song, and that was "The Best Is Yet to Come."
Right. What was that night like? I mean, was it pretty heavy? You kind of just, I mean, in the book, you kind of talk about a little bit of his decline, towards the
Yeah.
last little end of his career there. Um, and that night, you could feel it. It's heavy. You realize it's the end of this
No,
crazy career.
no, but Steve, I have to interrupt. He hadn't sung for 4 months, so
Oh,
we
okay.
didn't know if he was ever going to sing again because he wasn't in great health, and so no one knew was he going to sing again. And
Right.
that night was the Barbara Sinatra. It was a Frank Sinatra Celebrity Invitational golf tournament. It was a black tie affair. The closing of a couple of days of golf and raising money for the charity, and it was for the Barbara Sinatra Children's Center. So I was to do like 20 minutes of comedy. He was going to do 3 songs, and he hadn't sung in 4 months. So the conductor, Frank Jr., his son, didn't bring a lot of sheet music. He brought 6 songs because Frank was only going to sing 3. So all of us were concerned as he walked out. The crowd went wild.
Right.
He sang his first song. He got a standing ovation. He sang the second song. He got a standing ovation. He sang the third song. They couldn't get enough of him. And so now he ends up singing 6 songs. And the only reason he didn't do any more, they ran out of sheet music.
Really?
So he comes off stage and he looks at me. He said, "Don't put away that suitcase." So I thought, "Oh boy, we're going on the road again." But we didn't. He started getting ill and more ill. But that was it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it was kind of, here we are after Frank Sinatra. What do you think, from 96 until today, what do you think have been some of the bigger things that you've done so far? I mean, because you could have easily stopped there, right? If you didn't have the love for stand up, if it was purely a job. I mean, I don't know your situation, obviously, but I think you could have probably just carried on from there and just, you've done so much already. What are some of the things you've done since then?
I love stand-up comedy. I love it. Years ago I was working at Harrah's, and George Burns was at Caesars in Lake Tahoe, and I had done the Dean Martin roast. I roasted George Burns on the Dean Martin roast, and I liked him a lot, and so I rushed over to see his show, and he was 95 years old. He didn't run out to the microphone, but when he got out there, he did a strong hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And afterward, I went backstage and to see him, and he was in the dressing room. He had some 3x5 cards, and he was looking at these cards. And I said, "Hey, George, how you doing?" He goes, "Oh, hi, Tommy." He said, "I was working on some new material tonight." And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be 95 years old working on new material. So when Frank passed away, there was a big vacuum in my life. I mean, here I'm flying in private jets all over the world. Now I'm over in line at Piedmont. You guys got anything in coach?
Yeah.
I mean, I fly first class all the time. That's part of my contracts. But my point is that it was really a culture shock in children's, But I love stand up so much that I just kept working and doing corporate dates and and headlining myself in different places, but the interesting thing was, no matter where I went, no matter what I did, they wanted to talk about Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
David Letterman, my buddy,
Mm-hmm.
I did 50 David Letterman shows. Every time I went on the show, he wanted to know a Frank Sinatra story.
Mm-hmm.
I found that it was one time when I was on the jet with Frank, we were landing in Palm Springs. He kept his jet here in Sherman Oaks, where I live, in Van Nuys, but I live in Sherman Oaks. So I would get on the jet and fly down there, or I'd stay at his home and we'd fly out of there. But when he'd get on the jet there, we'd take off from there.
Right.
But anyhow, I forgot where I was going with this story.
Yeah, everybody's talking about, yeah.
I was saying, one time I landed with Frank, forgive me. One time we landed in Palm Springs and the jet was coming back here. Mm-hmm. And he said to me, "Tommy, you're going to spend the weekend." It was on a Thursday. I said, "No, I got to go in to do the Tonight Show on Friday." He said, "I'll call Freddie DeCorva. I'll get you out of it." I said, "No, I don't want to get out of it. It was my 50th appearance on the show, and we're making a big deal out of it." So he said, "Wow, 50 appearances on the Tonight Show." He said, that's quite a bit. That must be a record." I said, "No, there's a couple other comedians, David Brenner, I think Rodney, maybe Robert Klein. I don't know, maybe he did more than me, but it doesn't matter, Frank." I said, "No matter what I do the rest of my life, I could find the cure to cancer. People are going to say to me, my obituary is going to say that the comedian who opened for Frank Sinatra, no matter what I accomplish." Mm-hmm. He said, "Well, maybe my obituary say the singer who worked with Tom Dreesen," and we both started laughing like two high school sophomores. But it's come to pass. That's always happened to me. So after Frank, after Frank goes away, I was running a marathon one time in CNN. It was for multiple sclerosis, and because my sister had MS, and CNN cameras are out there, and they said, "We're out here with Tom Dreesen. He's about ready to start, ready to fire the gun, run his first marathon. Tom, tell us about Frank Sinatra." And he puts a microphone in front of me. So they all want to know. So now, that's when I wrote this one-man show. Mm-hmm. I kept my whole career. I tell young comedians, journal everything that happens to you at nighttime. Go before you go to bed. Journal what happened that day. If something poignant happened that day, or something very funny, or something tragic, but journal. And I did that. And so now I had enough material that I could do a one-man show. And so I do the one. I used to call it an evening of laughter and memories of Sinatra, but a lot of people thought, "Oh, are you going to sing?" So now I call it the man who made Sinatra laugh, and it's what I told you about earlier. So that kept me busy. Plus, doing corporate dates kept me busy. Plus, I'm a motivational speaker that I told you about. That kept me busy. In the meantime, I wrote a book that you talked about earlier, Still Standing. So I've kept myself busy, and I love golf, and I'm playing a lot of golf, and I'm enjoying life.
For sure. And I think you talked a lot about the relationship you had with Frank Sinatra. Obviously, me and you have talked about, or you and I have talked in length about, now it's private jets and now it's this, and kind of your perspective. In your book, you talk a lot about what Frank Sinatra was like. He was extremely generous, you mentioned. You talked about, he would just not only throw money, but just his time and blah, blah, blah. First of all, what do you think are your biggest takeaways from that relationship with that actual individual person, Frank Sinatra? You know what I mean? How did he influence you the most, do you think?
I had never been around anybody that's a living legend. People throw that word around.
Yeah.
But this was a living legend. This was a man who not only he transcended show business, not only was he the greatest pop singer of all time, without a doubt, the greatest pop singer of all time, went to the studio 1,431 times, recorded over 100 albums, was on the Billboard charts from the 1940s till the day he died, 3 Oscars, Grammys, and he won the Academy Award for acting in the movie From Here to Eternity. One night sitting with Gregory Peck, Jack Lemmon, with Clint Eastwood, with Robert Redford. I mean, not Robert, with Kirk Douglas and Robert Wagner. And back at Frank Shower, they were all sitting around talking. They were talking film and showbiz. And I was fascinated, just listening like a fly on the wall. But they were showing such great reverence to Frank. And I said to him, I was just curious. I said, did you study acting? Because out in Hollywood, they say, I studied with Stella Adler, I studied with Lee Strasberg. I was curious who he studied with. I said, you study acting? And Gregory Peck grabbed my arm and said, acting lessons would have ruined him. He was a diamond in the rough. You didn't fool with. That I took away that this learned actor, Gregory Peck, said acting lessons would have ruined him. When you gave Frank Sinatra a song, to him it was a script. What did the writer feel the night the writer took pen in hand?
Mm-hmm.
He immersed himself in that lyric and became that lonely guy in the bar whose woman left him and he's never going to find love again. It was an amazing thing to watch him. Charlton Heston once said, to watch Frank Sinatra sing a song is watching a 4-minute movie, because you felt that. Steve Lawrence, one of the great singers of our time, said to Frank one night when I was with him, he said to Frank, you know, you ruined it for all the rest of us.
Right.
Because once they heard you sing, they knew how that song was supposed to be sung. So I took away all of that, this guy larger than life. And how many people do you know are stars 10 years, 20 years, maybe 25 years?
Sure.
Who's a star for 60 years?
Right.
Who's a star? What singer do you know sang English in Brazil and sold 175,000 seats? One singer. I know you can tell me rock groups.
Wow.
One man.
Mm-hmm.
He sold out in Japan when he was 78 years old.
Wow.
We're talking about a phenom here. We're talking about, he danced with Gene Kelly in the movies.
Right.
He danced with Gene Kelly. This wasn't your ordinary star.
Mm-hmm.
This was a living legend.
Right.
And on top of all that, I could talk about Frank Sinatra for an hour and a half of all of his attributes.
Sure.
And at the end, I'll say, any questions? And one person will raise their hand and say, was Frank Sinatra in the mafia?
Right.
That mystique. Did he know those guys? Of course he knew those guys. We all knew those guys because they owned, when I started out, like when Frank started, way before me, they owned the nightclubs. They owned Las Vegas. They owned the recording companies. They owned the jukeboxes. They were syndicate owned all that. So they were so heavily involved in the business. Dumb question. Do you know them? Of course everybody knew them.
For sure.
Were you one of them? That's another story. So I took away that I have to tell you something else, Steve. In the years that I toured with Frank Sinatra, I turned down more sitcoms than most comedians get offered in a lifetime. I turned down more opportunities because I knew this was the end of an era, and I wanted to be there.
For sure.
As long as he wanted me, I wanted to be there. There were guys back home, Steve, that I did 60 Tonight. So I did all those things. Hey, Tommy, how's show business? But when I started touring with Frank Sinatra, those same guys, hey, you believe it? Tommy's with Frank Sinatra.
Right.
All of a sudden, all those other shows meant nothing, to the. I'm a street guy. I don't have a degree from academia. I got a doctorate from the streets. And my guys back home, it was a whole new ball game when you toured with Frank. Anyhow, that was kind of another long answer to a short question.
No. Okay, well, here's how I usually like to ask these questions to new guests on my show, right? The podcast is called Standing Still. I called it that because for me, it's kind of a moment of clarity, a moment of maybe appreciation. Sometimes it's, a memory that you have of kind of that. Like I said, for me, it's, just when I get to do these shows, I'm nowhere else but in the room, and I can just, not focus on what's behind me or what's in front of me, but I can just focus, probably similar to what you have on stage, I would imagine. But what does standing still mean to you?
Standing still?
Yes, sir.
That all of us, no matter who you are, there's a moment in your life that you just wish time would stand still. You wish time would stand still. We're moving so fast in this world. And you just think sometimes, there used to be a song like, and let the rest of the world go by, that you wish sometimes time would stand still. I always talk about Wrigley Field in Chicago. You're going through a neighborhood and you come to a stoplight, and there's a ballpark in this neighborhood. And you go inside that ballpark and you're going to sit in a seat that your great-great-grandfather sat in, that your grandfather sat in, that your father sat in, that you're sitting in, that your son will sit in, and his son. And you're all going to watch that same game. All of you watched. And for a moment, time stands still.
Interesting. For sure. And I know you were fortunate enough to throw the first pitch, to be a bat guy for the Chicago Cubs, which, I mean, you want to talk about just a passion project and kind of fulfilling that. That must have been awesome.
Well, I was a little boy. I used to, when I shined shoes in taverns and set pins and bowling, all that stuff, I'd bring my money home. My mother would she'd take the money to help feed the kids, but she'd put a nickel out of it into a cup, until a little cracked cup in her cupboard. When it got filled, my brother and I could take the IC downtown in the elevator over to Wrigley Field and sit in the bleachers.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd watch that little boy being a bat boy. And I'd say to my brother, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could be a bat boy? He said, oh, Tommy, they don't let us Southside guys, the rich kids from the North Side, they do that. Years later, I told Jim Fry, the manager of the Cubs, that story. So he said, well, I'll make you a bat boy. And I was a grown man in my 40s.
Right.
And he let me be bat boy four times, like a homestand for the Cubs. I did it for like 4 years. Letterman used to bust my onions, man. You're a grown man. You're picking up bats. What is wrong with you? But they let me hit batting practice. They let me run around the outfield, catch fly balls in those days.
Sure.
Yeah, I was a pig in slop,
Mm-hmm. Well, that's awesome, Tom. I can't thank you enough. Buy his book, Still Standing. It's a great read. I'm terrible at finishing books, and I finished yours without issue. I really enjoyed it. I know I already mentioned it before, but you mentioned how Frank for you was super generous. I think you looked up to him a lot. I just want to say that you do the same for me. Obviously, for your time to do this kind of show over the career that you've had, I think it really tells a lot about your character, and just man to man, I really appreciate your time, sir.
Well, you're more than welcome. Thank you very much. I was glad to do it, and I enjoyed it. You're a great buddy. You do a great job. You did a great interview. You asked good questions.
Thank you.
Of course, I gave you too long of answers. When we go off the air, I want to make a suggestion to you.
Sure. Anyways, well, thank you guys, and we are out. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to check out the Standing Still podcast, both here on YouTube and wherever else you listen to podcasts.